This episode is brought to you by Sudio, makers of fine earphones from Stockholm. And now for the show. Hello there. Welcome to another episode of Talk Music Talk with Boice. I am Boice, and this is my podcast that you are listening to. Talk Music Talk is a weekly music interview podcast where I have long-form conversations with people connected to music from different genres and different backgrounds, both established and emerging. I have talked to music therapists, music journalists, in addition to singers and singer-songwriters. And on this episode, I am bringing back one of my favorite episodes. It came out in October 2016, episode 100 with Carlos Dengler. Carlos D, former bassist of Interpol. This was this is my most downloaded episode and just got a great response from it. Thank you to everyone who said such wonderful things on Reddit and message boards, social media, the personal emails. I really appreciate it. People really connected to this conversation. Carlos is talking about for the first time why he left the band, first time publicly. He also talks about his acting career and so many other things in this great conversation. And I just wanted to reshare it because I have not done an episode in 4 months. Some speed bumps along the way, some roommate addiction drama, family drama, and quite frankly, I was just too depressed to even think about doing episodes, even though I really, truly missed being a podcaster. I just couldn't do it. I have moved out of my place and I'm feeling good about things. So I am back on my grind with the show and I want you to enjoy it. Before we get to the conversation, 2 things I wanted to tell you about. A new Talk Music Talk live podcast event is happening on July 20th. I will be joining up with the 33 and a third book series. You know the books, those CD-sized books filled with full-length essays on authors writing about their favorite albums. This will take place at the historic Strand Books in New York City. I will be in conversation with 4 authors from the series. George Grella, who wrote about Miles Davis's Bitches Brew. Ryan Leese, who wrote on LCD Sound System, Sound of Silver. Amanda Petrusich on Nick Drake's Pink Moon, and Christopher R. Weingarten on Public Enemies, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. Again, that's July 20th at Strand Books, a Friday. Head on over to strandbooks.com, go to the calendar section, and you can purchase your $10 gift card for admission. That $10 gift card can be used towards anything in the store. It doesn't expire, and you could even use it towards one of the books of the authors who will be there. I also want to talk to you about headphones. If you are in the mood for a pair of beautifully designed and great sounding headphones, look no further than Sudio Headphones. Based in Stockholm, they have a line featuring earbuds, over-the-ear models, and even wireless. I especially love the Regent pair because they go over the ears, and I have shallow ear canals and can't use anything else. These pair of headphones come with a detachable cord so I can use them with Bluetooth on my phone, or I can use the cord to record podcasts like I am doing now. Head on over to Sudio.com to get yourself a pair. And for the Talk Music Talk listener, you will get 15% off. Just use the discount code BOICE at checkout. That's BOICE. You will also get free shipping and a free tote bag while supplies last. Here it is, without further ado, my conversation with Carlos Dengler. Enjoy. So when I got here, you mentioned about, because I gave you a book of mine in different mediums, and sometimes you hear people say as an adult, I don't know what I'm going to be when I'm a grown up, right? So when transitioning from one medium to another, was that a natural transition for you, or did you have to fight it? Like, how did that transitioning look like for you?
And
I'm talking from music to acting, I guess.
Sure. Obviously. Yeah. I mean, it's so complicated, but, I don't think I had to fight it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it certainly didn't fit with the band.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Or at least what I was sort of needing from the theater was a kind of energy that I don't feel was capable of being present within the structure of being in Interpol.
Yeah.
So if there was any kind of fighting, it was because I was just sort of trying to decide, where did I actually want to go? Mm-hmm. But I feel that the actual curiosity and sense of adventure and passion that I have for art in general kind of fuels a natural tendency that I have to make transitions.
Okay.
And it wasn't, in a way, it's like, it gets more painful as we get older. But as a youth, I was switching all the time. Generally from, like, for instance, music, I would shift from being one thing to another. When I met the guys from Interpol, I was not pursuing a musical path because I'd already kind of wanted to be a scholar, if you will. And so I had already kind of made that transition. Yeah. And then I transitioned back into music. So now I transitioned out of music. So it's just a pattern with me.
Okay.
It just so happens that I believe that this transition is probably the best documented out of all of them because nobody knew who I was before the other ones.
So how did it rear its head when you were in the band?
How did it what?
Rear its head when you were in the band. Like, were you thinking about acting? Were you like watching movies and like, oh, I'd like to do that? Or
there was definitely a little bit of that. There was like a respect for acting that started to grow within me. I grew up not, my opinions were not, in the household that I grew up in, my opinions were not valued. I did not grow up in a supportive environment. I think I've attached some kind of like hardcore need to be heard, on a vocal level. And, but I've had problems around like having confidence around it because I always feel like I'm bad for that, because my parents kind of said that.
Yeah.
And the band for me was kind of like the perfect way for me to express myself without having to kind of poke at that, taboo of like speaking. I could be a silent bass player and then just use my image and my attitude and my style and my talent for the instrument and for the keyboards and everything that I was doing in the band, as a way to express myself. And then the desire to really, promote ideas that I have swimming around in my head, ways that I view the world and realities that I am interested in conveying, through interviews, through being on stage. It started to grow and it started to really, really take hold as the band became successful. And you get this feeling that you could do other things if you want to do. You get successful and it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, what else can I do? You get really excited. And I got very excited by acting. So I started taking acting lessons at this rinky-dinky, like not even a place. I mean, I hesitate to name it because I don't want to publicly bash like a place. But it was where I started. So, I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? So there's a value to that too. But like,
just getting started.
I was just getting started and it was fine. It was great. And that's where I discovered, theater. Because up until then I was like, oh, I just want to learn a little bit about acting, learn how to be on camera and then just like, be in a movie or something like that. I mean, I had that idea in my head because I'm already a famous guy in this band. Like, hey, I'll just be in a movie, And then I discovered the theater. Like, we did a scene from True West in scene study class. And that's when everything changed.
Okay.
That's when I was just like, oh, wait, I actually love this a little bit more than I thought I did.
Okay.
Up until then I was like, oh, well, I could never be a theater actor. That's just too, I wouldn't dare try to be a theater actor, but the passion for it overtook me. That really set me on a certain course, I think.
Mm-hmm. So then does that mean that the band was sort of become like a restraint or constraining to you?
You know, I want to say no, but I'd be lying if I did. Because it's just like, you know, things weren't good.
Yeah.
They just weren't good at the time. It's funny, you know, like you hear about this a lot of the time with marriages. You know, people leave other people and they immediately get married to other people.
Yeah.
And then you wonder, that person must have been there. They just come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, know? That is the assumption. Yeah.
You know, they were there before the divorce happened, you know, and people do that. And I suspect there's a little bit of that happening with me, where I kind of had discovered something else that was bringing me a kind of fulfillment that the band could never. And I was experiencing so much pain, being in the band, being in the music industry, that I have to admit, as much as I don't want to admit it, that I couldn't help but to feel that the band was constraining a creative impulse that I had within me. And it wasn't for lack of actually trying to make it work. You know, I tried to, I was like, you know, it was 3 torturous years of trying to, but it's like somebody discovers, you know, I got sober, you know, I discovered, okay, enough of this fucking rock star shit, you know, so like, who am I really? I want to try out things. I want to like investigate. I want to be curious about art. Finally, I'd woken up. I'd stopped doing all the drugs that I was doing, and I'd stopped drinking all the drinks I was drinking. And of course, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, so it was a hot mess, you know. But it's like it's new energy that was being introduced into a formula that had already kind of experienced a level of success. And what happens when the business model, you know, it's like that formula has to stick. And there I was like, well, actually, the formula is not complete yet, because like now I'm really interested in acting, and I've got to make that work, you know. And it got very, very complicated.
Yeah. So what was the sign, like maybe like the first sign when you realized that the band wasn't working? Because there's usually like some kind of clue before it's full blown.
It was weird, like during the recording of Our Love to Admire. I remember I was Paul and I were not speaking. Yeah. And to record a record under those kinds of circumstances is extremely difficult. I was getting really frightened, actually, at the notion of going on tour. Since, you know, I had gone on, it had been 2 tours already. And I had done those tours under a certain, like, I'm actually going to use this word, I guess. Okay. Do you know the word I'm talking about?
Yes.
You're a writer, of course you do. To all the listeners who don't know what the word Aegis is, it's spelled AEGIS, and please look it up and excuse the SAT word. But I went under those first 2 tours under a certain Aegis, and the Aegis was, thou shalt consume and obliterate thy surroundings at all costs. Okay. It was like the Nikki Sixx model of destruction. You know, it was like rock star, and that's what I'm doing. And then I sobered up. And so for the 3rd record, it became all about like, no, I want us to be like Radiohead. You know, like let's be like real artists now.
This is sober you.
Yeah, sober. Okay. And so, you know, in practice, or in your mind, all of this makes sense. In practice, it's actually quite a different story. And, you know, so there were ruptures, and, you know, I started to feel really, like, I don't know how I can go on this tour. I don't feel like myself. I don't feel safe. I don't feel supported. The band started to feel frightening to me. I realized I wasn't friends with these guys. I've been so busy with me and my persona and who I wanted to be, and Carlos D and blah, blah, blah. Everything was different. And I wanted to pause. I wanted to, like, I don't know. I don't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I announced to the guys when it was like towards the end of Our Love to Admire recording sessions, I said, guys, I don't know if I can go on a tour. Like, I mean, maybe can we, talk about it, or like, is there a break that we could take? I can't exactly remember what the words were. Now you have to understand, Capitol Records. Okay, we had just signed to them, and it's like they're fucking throwing the whole fucking magazines at us, and like the all the ammo, all the marketing, it's just like everything is getting ready. It's like, when's the album going to get done? Because we're going to start blah blah blah. Yeah. It's a huge like marketing blitz, and a huge like promotion. Just with any album, it's like it's a campaign. Yeah. It's a total campaign.
And you're coming off an album that did really really well too, and so there's a lot of expectation.
There were a lot of expectations. So the feeling that I got when I announced that was not good from my bandmates.
Yeah.
And, we sat around and we talked, but I could tell that there was like panic.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't feel ready to address the panic. So I did go on that tour, and then a whole shit ton of stuff happened that was really bad on that tour. And in many ways, I feel like if I were a different person, like with a different set of communicative tools, which I did not have, I did not know who I was. I did not know who Carlos Dengler was as a person. I had absolutely zero clue about what his needs were and what his wants were. If I had a better idea of that, if I had better parentage, if I had a better upbringing, if I had more of a sense of who I was, and I was in that band, I think I would have been able to communicate what my needs were during that time in a much, much more effective way. But I just wasn't. I probably would have said, like, we have to take a month break, or we need to enter counseling because we're not getting along, and so but I was so afraid of so many things. Like, I was so spooked out by all of it, and I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to do it. And then that actually ended up being repeated on the fourth record. That's when I was like, okay, well, that's not going to happen again, actually. I am not going to go on that tour again.
So how do you when was it enjoyable? Like, prior to the recording of the first album?
Of the first album?
Yeah. Like, was there enjoyment?
Oh, yeah.
At some point?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it was so exciting to be in a band in New York in the late 90s and in the early aughts, especially when you just started to get a sense that people were really listening. This is like the birth of hipster culture. The idea of a hipster was just not an idea before this. And when the Strokes happened, it was just, kind of like a road had become paved in a way. And so everyone was walking down that road, and was like, wow, this is a fucking great new road. Like, look at this. Over here's the fucking Ramones, and over here's television. It's like all these bands that we forgot about, and they're here now. And there's all these bands that kind of sound like them, blah, 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 blah. And here, look, there's Interpol that like is kind of like Joy Division, but they're also a New York band. Like, holy fucking shit. There was this sense of excitement, sense of promise. And to be in the middle of that was, it was also concomitant with Electroclash as well.
Okay.
So clubbing was like a thing back then that like is not, this is pre-Facebook and all of that. So like people were still flyering, but there were so many different nights to go to where the same people went to, but it was like a different bar all the time. Okay. And it was all like, and the 80s was like the retro 80s thing, like electro thing was like happening like full force. I mean, it was exciting. It was totally exciting on like a nightlife level. And what I personally loved about being in Interpol during that time was that how seamlessly Interpol fit with that whole thing. So what ended up happening for me was that the actual business of being in a band then had to actually happen. And that's where I started to go, oh, wait, this is not what I want. So I would be the guy that was always late to the bus. I was the guy that was always complaining that we weren't at home. I got homesick terribly. Like, I just didn't want to be on the road. I wanted to be in New York City where like everything was happening. And yet at the same time, being on the road and seeing people like welcoming you to the city, like your album's already sold like X amount of copies in this market, and this show has already sold out, and everybody's like Carlos, and everybody's like Daniel, and everybody's like Paul, and Interpol, and blah, blah. Yeah, of course, that's fucking exciting. I mean, that's like, it's hard not to like be any kind of person and be given that kind of attention and not somehow become absolutely seduced by it. It's impossible. The energy is too overwhelming, And then of course the music. I mean, like, to me, I know the third record it has some people, and some people aren't such big fans of that. I don't know whether we're going to talk about the fourth record, but we can talk about it. It has not been spoken of. I have my own position on that I have not publicly spoken about, and I will absolutely give you
I absolutely love the fourth album.
Really?
Yes, the Antics in the fourth album.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Wait, Antics in the fourth
album. Those are my favorites.
So I believe that Antics is actually the best Interpol record. I think that what people love about the first record is just how raw and visceral and how just kind of like, I mean, it's your classic first album from a band. It's like, it'll never be repeated again. Like, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You're just like on a shoestring budget, and you're just like, this part needs to go down. It's like, and it's very punk in that sense. And it's like, there are some issues with the way that album sounds. There's like, a kind of pacing that it has that is, in my opinion, structurally a little bit problematic. But it, there is an excitement. There's like a newness there, and so of course I completely understand why people would be like, Bright Lights. That's what, Antics. I think. So Bright Lights, like any band's first record, is really like a greatest hits of like the band's demo years. That's essentially what a first album should be. So like Interpol had already been together as a band for about 5 years because we officially formed in 98, met in 97. So we'd known each other for over 5 years. And PDA was the first song that was Daniel and I, when I first met him, our very first like session together, we wrote PDA, like at Funkadelic Studios in 1997. So like, and then that's the first single on the first record, right? So that song, and that was like the third recording of PDA. Like that. So it's like that was like an old song by the time it got to, and so were many others. So it's like, it really, what it was the greatest hits, but Antics is like, we created that album in a year, and there was like a whole thought process behind it. And the production behind that record, I find to be absolutely flawless. And I find the narrative aspect of Antics to be absolutely compelling. So whenever I hear somebody say that they're a fan of Antics, I'm like, great. Yeah. Because I do have such a respect for that record. Like, just as a record, I think it is such a powerful, tight, short, to the point, kind of like classic kind of post-punk record or alt-rock or whatever you want to call it. Post-punk revival. I think that might be the technical term. I think that's the technical term for Interpol, is that post-punk revival. And then, Our Love to Admire was like an attempt to kind of expand the horizons. And in a way, I considered it like a preamble to the fourth record, in the sense of like, we're trying to kind of become like a bigger band now. So like, we don't yet know exactly how to do that. So but here it is, and it's a placeholder. The idea was that the fourth record would be kind of that, the fruition of that effort. Okay.
So it'd be more transitional, the third album.
Yeah, I would consider, like, for instance, Bright Lights to be a transitional record to Antics. And then I would consider Our Love to Admire to be a transitional record to the fourth album.
Okay. But you don't feel like with the fourth album,
tell me
met that.
Tell me why you like the fourth record. I want to hear this.
Probably the melodies. Like, for me, the melodies are strong, or near as strong as the second album, as Antics. So yeah, I'm like a melody guy. So
vocal melodies.
The vocal melodies. So like, if you're very hook driven, like I can tell you, what is it, like the first 4 songs, and then I don't know the titles.
Wow.
Track 6 and 7. Was it Lights, Barricades? Like, those are 2 of my favorite Interpol songs. And then the last song.
Lights. Yes.
Yeah, Lights and Barricades. Yeah. Yeah, so for me, it's like Antics and then underneath Antics.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good for you, man. Because that album...
Because they got trashed or they got mixed reviews.
No, I don't know.
Am I being generous?
I think you might be being generous, yes.
So what was... Okay, so the sound of Our Love Is Here to Stay. Were you the influence of it? Our Love to Admire. Whose album is there? Whose album is that? Well, that's an old classic.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's someone else. Our Love, yeah, that's like an old standard. Yeah. So was that you a part of your influence, the stretching out? Like you feeling restrained and wanting more?
Yeah, well, I think with the sobriety, I was discovering classical. I was rediscovering classical music. Mm-hmm. When I was in the 90s, when I stopped listening to rock and roll, I started listening to classical music exclusively, and I was like, okay, I'm a scholar. I'm going to go to NYU and be a philosophy professor, and I'm only going to listen to Shostakovich and fucking Beethoven and Mahler, and like that's going to be my life. And then I rediscovered rock and roll and like forgot about that because I was like, you can't fuck to that music, so I'm just gonna, can't be a rock star to like that. And then when I got off my rock star thing, I was like, no, classical. What happened to classical music? Like, I love classical music. So I was like listening to all my old classical albums again, and then I was like, I want to see how we can throw this into the band.
Okay.
I was discovering all this software, which actually Sam turned me on to because he was already kind of like a gearhead and like was like into all of these like symphonic plugins and like all these different kinds of sounds. So I like totally picked up on that. I set up like a whole like project studio in my room, and I spent tons of money on like symphonic sounds and like, so I got really big on the keyboards. And for me, I just wanted to phase the bass guitar out of it and bring in the keys. Like I wanted to like create sonic tapestries and so forth. So that, that was starting in Our Love to Admire. Okay. And the goal for me, with the fourth record, was to really like, create like a kind of like, I think we were very conscious about this. We wanted it to be our Kid A.
Okay.
That was like kind of the goal. We were using Kid A as kind of like the template in terms of the fourth record.
Okay. Which I don't hear.
Well, there's a reason why you don't. Boys.
What would that be?
So, I think to me, one of the greatest, it's just, it makes me really sad. It's because of the way that I left, basically, we were recording this record and relations between us had devolved to their worst level. And we were in counseling and we were not getting along and we were just tired. We were just so tired. And, I was the guy that was like, I don't know if I want to be in, to their credit, Sam, Paul, and Daniel, they knew they wanted to be in the band. Like they knew they weren't undergoing some kind of existential crisis about whether, they needed to be in Interpol or not. I was the guy who was undergoing that existential crisis. And I think that in a way, really made things very difficult for me and for them but in a way that made it kind of singled me out in a certain way. Now, I'm not trying to excuse any of the things that happened because some of the things that happened were not good, but I was the one who left because I was the one who was having an issue with just the very notion of whether I even wanted to be in a band in the music industry and so forth. But I knew that if I was going to be in the band and be in the music industry, that I did have certain artistic goals and certain aims, and I had certain personal issues with Paul mostly, but also with the other bandmates. So I was up against a lot. Like I was encountering my own personal demons. I was undergoing therapy. I was sober. I was realizing who Carlos Dengler was, and is something that I had never even thought about before, and here I was kind of waking up to this reality of who I am. I'm still in that recovery process, and that's this has been 6 years since that. And, it was frightening, you know, because I was waking up to a Wikipedia page, you know, of like this guy called Carlos D. And I was just like, who the fuck is this fucking dude? It was like a dream. Like I'd wake up and I had like this bender that I'd been. I was like, I woke up and I was like, what the fuck did I do last night? Except it was like 5 years and 3 albums and 3 tours and a band and like drugs and like all this shit, you know? And it's like, what the fuck has happened? Like I just had no way of processing it. So, I mean, I was full on freak out, like survival mode. And I really honestly was trying my best to make it work. But, you know, personal issues are personal issues. And the personal issues that were happening in this group, whether or not I wanted to stay in them or not, there was an ongoing personal issue between myself and Paul that finds its origin virtually from the moment that we met. Okay. And that was a problem that went ignored because, you know, the band, you're young and whatever. This is just 23. I don't know what the fuck. Like, yeah, I like you. No, I don't like you. I like you. No. You don't really think about this stuff when you're in your 20s. Then fame takes over. Then things get big. Shit gets solidified. You get less freedom to do things because now you're a product and egos get big. Yeah. And it gets worse. And then next thing you know, it's 2010, you know, and you're on your 4th record and you're not budging. And that's what was happening. And so it was a fucking clusterfuck. Now, at the same time, I'm doing this record, right? I'm like thinking into myself, okay, I want this record to be really symphonic. Yeah. And, you know, I've thought about this a lot, and I do feel that it was a bit pretentious and kind of unrealistic of me. I think I kind of, in a way, was very much in love with the idea of expanding the sonic palette of the band, but I don't know that I was really looking into the practical aspects. The fact that there were 3 other guys in the room, that this was a collaboration, I really was not thinking too much about those sorts of things. Nonetheless, I was so fucking into the music that we were recording. And by the time we got into the studio to finish those tracks, shit got so bad between me and Paul and between me and kind of the other 2 guys as well, between me, Sam, and Daniel. Like, so much trust had been broken, so much bad juju had happened that I had to leave. And I recorded all my keyboard parts and my bass parts, and I handed them over to the engineer. And in like a CD-ROM, and I then went to our last therapy session, and I said,
"This is it."
I said, "This is it, guys." And you know, we hugged, and I left halfway through. And I was going to, you know, the therapist was like, "Okay, good. Well, come back and let's reconvene in 2 weeks to process this." And I called her, and she didn't return my call, so I don't think that they were really interested in reprocessing.
Like, nah, we're good.
Yeah, they're like, "We're good. You're gone. Fuck you." I don't know if that's actually what it was, but the point is that there was a plan to like reconvene to process, and it never happened. So that happened. I dove into like, I was at Stella Adler learning to be you know, the beginning stages of acting and all of that. And, I was just pretending that, Interpol never happened. I was just like, whatever. It just never happened. I'm just going to start the fuck over. Who cares? I'm 35. Like, I can do this. You know, kind of like another fantasy in a way.
Okay. But we got to go back at some point. Okay.
To what?
Okay, the sound of the album. Like,
sure, I'm about to. Yeah.
Okay, we're getting there. Okay,
yeah. Because I had left that CD-ROM with the engineer, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't there for the mixing. I wasn't there for anything.
Okay.
And so one of my classmates at Stella Adler, like a year later, was like, "I have the new Interpol album. I don't know if you want to hear it." And I was like, Okay.
So you hadn't even heard it prior to it being released?
Oh, no, dude. Okay. I completely shut my ears. I hibernated. I was like, I don't want to know. I don't blah, blah, blah. And, I'd spent a year with talking with a lawyer about a separation agreement.
Okay.
It was bad. It was like, I was just going to acting school and like trying to get a separation agreement signed between me and them. Like, and I didn't want to listen to anything. Yeah. I didn't want to, I was just angry and I was fuck this. And I'm just want to focus on my acting right now and blah, blah, blah. And when my classmate said, I have the new intro. So she burned a copy for me. And when I heard that album, I was shocked. I gotta say that I was totally, absolutely 100% shocked. And look, I left the band. So who am I to to say anything, right? I mean, come on. I'm not here to be like, oh, you fucking did this. We were supposed to make, and then you turned it into this. I'm not here to say that. Yeah. I fucking left the band. I rescinded any kind of creative control of that. So that being said, it was absolutely not the intent. And so I was fairly aghast by the results of the mixing, of the vocals, of, none of those vocals that are on there, or I think 99% of those vocals were not what I think Paul, if I can surmise correctly, I don't know. I haven't spoken to him in 6 years, but if I had to guess, I think I left and then he decided to just start from square one. Okay. Because none of the vocals that we had worked on were on that album. As far as I can recall, I remember listening to it and being like, oh my God, none of this is like what we worked on. And you know what? If I were in his shoes, I'd probably do the same thing. Some guy quits a band and blah, blah, blah. The point is, I do need to state for the record that for me, that album it breaks my heart. It's like this child that I had to let go of, that I could never claim, and I can never claim that child, but I did raise it for the first 2 years. So I do know what it could have been, or what if I would have stuck around for that mixing session. I always wonder what that album could have been like, but certainly what it is in terms of what was released is not what I was, kind of participating with.
So was it a sonic problem issue, or was it songwriting? Were you happy with the songs?
Yeah. See, that's what I think. I think if one takes a re-listen to that record and just tries to factor out the mixing, because the mixing is really bad, and the keyboards are completely submerged. That album, I was barely playing any bass when we were rehearsing for that record. It was I was behind the keyboard console, working with a computer, and Sam was going to a click, so all the keyboard parts were just kind of happening with Sam. Yeah. I think if you were to if the album were remixed, brightened up, I don't know what vocally would happen in that case. Yeah. I don't know that the vocals I only listened to the album once. Okay. So, this is just coming from one.
I've listened to the album more than you.
Oh, you absolutely have listened to the album more than I have.
I've been listening to it since it came out, right?
Wow. I mean, maybe it deserves a second listen. Maybe it doesn't, but, I don't know what kind of vocal treatment, this, fantasy new mix of the fourth record would require, or what would be appropriate for that. But if you just take that out of the mix for a second, and if we try to think about what my intentions were behind the record as I was working with them on it, the keyboards would be much higher in the mix. There were lots of keyboard arrangements that were composed that didn't make it to the mix. There's a whole kind of I don't know, it's an emphasis on there that was, that's missing, I think. I think it's maybe they needed to do it very quickly. I'm sure that my departure probably created a lot of chaos and, just probably scrambling. So maybe they just didn't have a chance to really to do it. I don't personally know what the actual circumstances behind the engineering of the record was, but I don't feel that it was mixed properly at all.
What was your part in songwriting? in that process?
I was. It was what it
like. Was it like you were sitting in a room together?
So I mean, this was a constant like problem as well for me. Mm-hmm. I just, when I think back to the kind of person that I was when I was in the band, there was a lot of stuff that I was fighting for that I thought like to me it was like the most important thing in the world. And for me, the most important thing in the world was the songwriting dynamic between me and Daniel. Okay.
So you were like the core.
That's how I wanted it.
Okay.
And I don't think that that's what the reality was, mm-hmm. actually. I think the reality was that there was someone else in the band that also wanted, that was uncomfortable with that dynamic. Mm-hmm. And, that was a huge issue in the band for like a long, for the entire history of it.
Okay.
So, for a while we worked around it. And then I think when it came time to the fourth record, we started the fourth record and I made a very, very firm announcement. For this record, it's going to be Daniel and me because mm-hmm. I don't want to collaborate anymore on we'll get much more done. And I just, mm-hmm. and, there was a begrudging, response to that. Yeah. And then it just created more tension and so forth. And, when I think about that, I also think like, it's just, I'm not here to cast blame mm-hmm. and say like, oh, because if that person didn't cooperate, then things would have worked out and I would have stayed or anything like that's, ultimately, I don't think it was my fate to stay mm-hmm. in the band no matter what. So my role in that was that I don't think that I was, I think I was being very, intransigent mm-hmm. about that. I was like, this is how it's going to happen. Yeah. And I'm sick of this and blah, blah, blah. And it was somewhat of a tantrum. Mm-hmm. But in my opinion, I feel like that was where the best work was coming from. Was me and Daniel working together. Mm-hmm. And so that's how that fourth record kind of came about. It was like a lot of keyboard parts written while Daniel was playing the guitar.
Okay. And then Paul would do his own lyrics. Is that
exactly?
Okay. Was he coming up with the vocal melodies or was it you and Daniel?
Oh no, Paul always wrote the vocal melodies.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So this is also fascinating.
You think so? Yeah.
Yeah. This is good. So my thing is, how do you even write songs when you're feeling all of that tension? And was the tension between you and Paul, was that just one of those things you met and like sometimes you meet people and just the chemistry is just off? Like there's really nothing you could do to fix it. Like people would have to become someone else entirely. And like if you're starting from there, other than just treating each other with respect, how could you possibly even fix that? Other than treating someone with respect, like how can you even fix like the chemistry is just off?
No, you can't. I think you're right. And I think it is really a really rare band that actually has, I don't know what U2 is like. I don't mm-hmm. know what the Chili Peppers are like as a band. I don't know what their internal family dynamic is. Yeah. I don't know who like the whistleblower is and mm-hmm. who is the father and who is like the forgotten child. Like, every band has its, everyone in it. It's a family. And therefore it has and if it's a functional family, mm-hmm. everyone has a voice and everyone. And I imagine that with the legacy acts like Radiohead, like you could say, I'm sure they strike me as a band that probably have worked out their personal kind of way of working mm-hmm. with each other really, really well. I have big time family issues. Yeah. I grew up in a awful family mm-hmm. with lots of trauma, lots of abuse. I don't speak to my parents any longer. Okay. I don't even keep in touch with my family because the recovery that I'm undergoing, it has required me to completely separate from the toxic dysfunctional elements.
Okay. Just to protect yourself.
To protect the integrity of the self, which was denied as a child.
Your only child or something?
No, I mean, I might as well be an only child. I have a brother, and he too, I mean, we were victimized. We were absolutely victimized. And, I say victimized. I think, part of the struggle is to stop looking at yourself as a victim and start looking at yourself as a survivor. And that's what I am. I am a trauma survivor.
Yeah. But at the time, as it's happening, you are
a victim. Yeah. Of course. Your parents, it's a birthright that's denied you, when your parents abuse you. So, and I think what we do as people, and I'm not alone, and this is a very common, and you especially if you start to undergo this kind of therapy and this kind of recovery, you start to see other people and how they've strategized their kind of trauma that they grew up with. And what we do, it's what it's called, it's traumatic reenactment is what it's called.
Okay.
And we just find the same family again. We just do it. We're so good at this, We're so good at just being like, I'm missing an abusive father.
There you are.
There you are. Yeah. And it is uncanny the extent to which Interpol became my second abusive family. And I'm not trying to say like, and I was another victim again. I was victimized again. I'm only saying that it was like I had restaged my family trauma.
Yeah. And it's unconscious.
Completely unconscious.
It's happening.
Completely. Yeah. And that's what was going on, and that was the kind of pain that I was dealing with, and the privilege to have been in a band like that, that has had that kind of an impact, coupled with what I know about what it was like to be in it and what was going on internally for Carlos Dengler, not Carlos D, not like the persona or whatever, but the man, the person. It's been, it's been a lot of like having to a lot of talking to God. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like a lot of just like, wow, what is anything actually? So that being said, I think, that was Interpol's situation from my perspective, just from mine. Now, I'm not trying to ascribe anybody, they can have their perspectives, and I don't know what Interpol is like now as a band, as a threesome, or however they are functioning. Like, I am extremely happy for them that they are still together and they're still doing the music and still like going out there. I know what it's like to be out on the road and to actually have to show up for all of these events, and it is not fucking easy. And so I have nothing but total respect for what they do. I have nothing but total respect for them as musicians, as people. I'm not here to say like what they, that this was the Interpol reality. Yeah. This was mine. It was my reality. Yeah. And yes, the chemistry issue was a fucking problem. It was a fucking problem. It's like, when you're like in your family and you've got a cousin and you're just like, I am never gonna fucking get along with you ever, am I? And you show up for Thanksgiving and you're just like, wow, okay, we gotta sit through this now. And except you're on tour with this person and you're on,
And it's something like animals that sub that. Like you'll see two dogs and are like, oh yeah, there's something about you, I don't know. And trust that. With humans, you always like want to question that. Like, well, why is it like that?
We should rise above that. And it's like, no, you don't need
sometimes
to like,
you can't.
Sometimes you can't. Not everybody, like God did not intend for every single person to get along with every other person on the planet. Like God didn't intend that.
So what was the therapy? What was that called again?
That I am undergoing, or that the
reenactment?
Well, the traumatic reenactment is a symptom of PTSD. Okay, but it's trauma therapy.
Okay. And how did you get out of your family? Like, when did you leave? Going to school? Like, how did you get away from that?
That has actually been fairly recent.
Okay, because I saw your post on Facebook about your father.
Yeah. So that's like, for instance, that post was, I had to think long and hard about I think here's the thing, like, you know, you go, some people, and everyone chooses their own way to do this. So like, you know, some people say, I got to keep this private and no one's going to know. And that's fine. The thing with me is like, I think trauma functions very much on a collusionary level. Like the collusion is a huge element of trauma, which is the secrecy. Like, thou shalt not say what happens in the house. And so then you live with this mentality for the rest of your life, thinking like, no, I'm actually not allowed to talk about this. So in separating myself from these toxic elements, I've actually felt, and I made a decision, and I think I made that decision that Father's Day, that I was like, no, it actually is necessary for me to be public about this, because it's a way, at least for me, to defy the collusionary aspect, which keeps me inside the traumatic reenactment.
And the shame.
And the shame
secrecy.
And the secrecy and the awful torture and pain of it.
Yeah. Did anyone know what was going on with you as a kid?
I didn't know what was going on with me, so no one else knew.
Okay.
I mean, my parents...
Like, did you tell people? Like, you...
I had no clue about the kind of shit that I went through in my childhood while I was in Interpol. Okay. Like, I had absolutely no idea. Like, as far as I was concerned, everything was fine. Like, look, I'm successful now, so like, everything must be perfect, right? Yeah. You know, I mean, that's another part of the lie. Okay. You know,
but like the trauma as it was going on.
While I was a child?
Yeah. Were you confiding in anybody?
Nope.
Or okay.
No, I was completely alone.
So you have a relationship with your brother?
I don't have a relationship with my brother.
Okay. Now, do they reach out to you? Or?
They do not.
Okay. And how long has this been since you've not?
You know, I've had a complicated relationship with my brother for years. And I think, you know, to me, I have such great sadness about that, you know, you know, I'm undergoing a process of coming to terms with, you know, there's a whole amends process. There's a lot, there's a, you know, when you're an older brother too, it's, you know, it goes one way. It's not the other way, you know. So
you're the older brother? Or
yeah, I have no business like being resentful about anything that he's done. So that, you know, that's the older brother problem, you know. And that is...
What's the age difference?
2.5 years.
Okay.
But, you know, it's another symptom of the trauma, I think, you know, where like, you know, somebody that you grow up with you can't even be friends with them because, you know, what you went through together was so awful that, and, you know, it's sad. There's so much sadness there, you know, but there's also so much hope. You know, I have a lot of hope because I'm bringing all of this into consciousness for myself. Okay. You know, I have a lot of hope about being friends with Interpol again, and you know, I don't know, like I have no idea like what that would look like, or like, you know, how well it would be received, or I have no. All I know is that that I have my own stuff to unpack, you know, truths that I once thought were like, made me look valiant, like, oh, well, I will like defy this reality. And it's like in the intervening years, I have realized that actually the situation is a little bit more complicated than that. And I think going public, like how you said about that post, I think what's important, you know, I'm also writing a memoir and all of that sort of stuff. And I think what's important in coming out is like people don't realize, you know, what it's like to be in a band. And I think that like, I don't know, I haven't read many rock memoirs, but what I long for is a kind of memoir or a kind of accounting of like just how intense the process of being in a successful band is on a personal level. Like what kind, and you know, some kind of monster kind of like does a little bit. I don't know if you've seen, I'm sure you've seen it. Yeah. So it's like, it does kind of like hint at, it doesn't do it all the way, but it does hint at a lot of those. It was very, in fact, when we entered counseling, we were telling the counselors that we were interviewing, like, please watch some kind of monster because this is what we want to happen to us.
Because I don't think people either, even seeing that movie, that there is almost an envy of your life. So that's not deal with that? Whatever interpersonal stuff, deal with it because you're famous and...
Have you seen the Amy documentary?
No.
That documentary is so powerful.
Oh, the Amy Winehouse thing? Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Oh, you did see it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like you kept rooting like, okay, this is going to end differently, even though you know it's not.
I think one of the most telling aspects, there's a moment in there where there's like I don't know if it's not the Grammys, it's some award that's being presented. And she's not there to receive her award, and the presenter cracks a joke.
Yeah.
Which, for the longest time she was the butt of the jokes, blah, blah, blah. And Dave Grohl is actually in the shot. He's in the background and he chuckles along with the joke.
Yeah.
And it made me think like, I was like, oh, and I was chuckling too when those jokes were being made. I was also participating in that bashing of Amy Winehouse, and then she died. And it's like you watch this documentary and you kind of say like, wow, somehow I was complicit in her destruction.
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen? And it makes me angry. It makes me so fucking angry. When you see the people that handled her father, like all these people who don't give a shit about the person Amy Winehouse, and they only fucking care about the product.
Yeah.
And this was a sensitive woman who had no business like screaming at 20,000 fans. Like, she was a jazz singer. She needed to be in clubs and just like, and for whatever reason, her voice was so immaculate that it caught like fire. And she was not prepared for that. No. And then she became the butt of everyone's jokes. And she's just trying to deal with the situation. And she's got nobody that's supporting her. And then meanwhile, the entire public is making fun of her at the whole time. There is nobody listening to this person who is crying out. And then she dies. And it makes me fucking angry because I could have died. I could have died so many fucking times.
It gotten that bad for you?
Yeah. Yeah, it really did. There were so many nights where it was like, oh my God, like, I think I could die right now,
You wanted to?
I don't know if I would say that I wanted to, but the path that I was on was so extreme that that I felt it could. I don't know. I just try to mention like maybe I could have met somebody and maybe fallen in love with a certain kind of person and then gone in this, or who knows what event might have like led me into like a certain community in some city maybe, and I would have hung out there and maybe started doing heroin. I don't know what, like, I got saved. I got saved is what it was. I am fucking lucky to be alive because of like the intensity of that lifestyle. So I think, people, I think you're right. I think people, have very little sympathy for people who are successful. They're just like, what the fuck do I need to listen to you for? Mr. Moneybag success, fame and fortune. And I don't think that people really realize the whole story behind it. And I don't think that they understand what's actually going on like a microscopic level, like psychologically, sociologically. That Amy Winehouse story is like a combo of like trauma, psychology, and sociology all conspiring together with capitalism to essentially amount to yet another entry into the 27 Club. That yet another one. Look it up on Wikipedia, and see the fucking long list on the 27 Club. And that's not even counting the people that aren't in the 27 Club that have also died for very, very similar reasons. It's a fucking dangerous lifestyle, and it's a dangerous undertaking for certain people. Like, I know from the people that I was in a band with, like, there were certain dangerous moments for some of them, but for some others, like, they never got dangerous. There's a way that you can just be in that lifestyle and not be in danger if you yourself have a certain kind of psychological makeup, a certain kind of character, certain needs, whatever. You're mellower, but if you are like me or like a host of others that go in that are artistic and creative and go into this sort of thing, You know, like Anthony Kiedis is a great, his memoir, it's a fucking great example of that sort of thing. And it's always so fantastic when you do read about the people that kind of face that and then they just
make it out.
On.
Did people know what you were going through?
No.
Like how deep it was? Okay. What do you get, like, really good at hiding it?
You become an expert. I was hiding it from myself as well. That third tour was the worst. There was one time I thought I was going insane. I was hiding in my hotel room all the time. And I was just working on my computer on music and overworking the shit out of myself. Working on a movie that was just awful. Yeah. Like the movie is just, I love that I did that movie, but the movie itself is just, but it was like, I didn't know what I was doing, but I just needed to work on something that was not the best. And I was overworking the shit out of myself. And, it was in Australia and I was in my hotel room and I really thought we had to play a show and I really thought I was going to lose it. Like I thought I was going to have a psychotic break. And, I opened the, there was like a sort of like French door window style kind of porch, like a tiny little terrace kind of opening in the hotel room. And I opened it out into the street and the brisk fresh air kind of came in and I saw all these birds like flying from treetop to treetop, like flocking together and singing together. And I was just like, oh my God, life is happening. It just kind of did something to me. Like I was like, okay, I'm alive. I'm okay.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a divine intervention in a way. But that was like, for instance, that's one example of how I was saved. There were numerous other times that I was saved as well. But I was, during that tour, towards the end of it, I'm not very proud of this, but I was also requesting my own dressing room because I just didn't want to talk to anybody.
Okay. What was your drug of choice?
Well, on the third tour, I had stopped all drugs.
Okay, you stopped it.
I mean, I was like an occasional drinker, but like even that, so like, but for, during the Carlos D Rockstar years, it was cocaine.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So how did you get sober? Like, what was, define that moment? Like, how did that happen?
I mean, that one is, I got my heart broken. I broke somebody's heart and then they broke my heart.
Okay.
And I think this kind of like, it like destroyed the God construct that I had around myself. Like that I was God and like I could do whatever the fuck I wanted. Like all of a sudden that came crashing down.
Yeah.
And so I got really scared. I was like, oh, I can't be Carlos D anymore. And I turned everything. That's when I like rediscovered classical music. Okay. I stopped going to like the dive bars that I was going to. Like stopped hanging out with all those people who were still doing blow and like it just. And then I retreated. I really totally retreated into kind of like a cocoon in a way.
Was it hard for you to get sober?
No, but it was hard for me because I didn't enter recovery immediately and I didn't go to rehab. I didn't have the tools to deal with the lifestyle, with the business of being in a band and being sober at the same time. And when I left the band, that was when it was clear that I needed to do something about my thinking.
Okay.
It was no longer the actual behaviors themselves. It was my thinking.
Okay. And I know I want to say about your post on Father's Day, because we talked about it as people have already read it. So basically, the gist of it is that you don't have a relationship with your father, and you wrote that on Facebook. So that's the gist. That'd be the gist of it.
Oh, yeah, that is the gist.
Okay, that's the gist of it. I know we referenced it without actually saying
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm sure people will Google. Like, post on Father's Day, and they'll go to my Facebook page and just post, here's this post.
Yes. So what was the time frame? Okay, so you leave Interpol, and then from going to NYU for acting.
From being accepted to NYU?
Yeah. Like, what was the...
So that's like, I left in January of 2010, and then I got accepted to NYU I guess I want to say like March or April of 2012.
Okay, but you had applied, I guess, like sometime before.
Yeah, I went in. I auditioned twice in a row.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what was your intention of going into school?
To get the best possible theater training that a person could get. And to just start from scratch.
Yeah.
And to learn how to be an actor without my persona.
And was that hard for you to give up?
Yes. And it still is hard to give up. It goes, fame, the cameras, the whole experience and everything that people thought that, even like when people today say Carlos, it's just, I'm just like, I don't know who you're talking about actually. Like I had it's like people, who fascinates me is people like Alice Cooper. He's got to have figured out a way to be whatever his real name is. Yeah. I don't think it's a very pretty name from what I recall.
Vincent?
It's Vincent
Ferner.
That's right. It's something like that.
Why do I know that?
Yeah, why do you know that?
I have no idea.
It's like Vincent Ferner.
Yeah, I think that's it.
And it's just like, how does Vincent Ferner deal with Alice Cooper? He's either gone Kanye West style and bought into his own like persona about it, but there's something about him that makes me feel like, no, he hasn't done that. Like he's kind of made a deal somewhere and he's been like, I know that I'm Vincent Ferner and I'm just going to keep playing this role because it makes money and I have fun doing it. And there's just some kind of exchange that he's made and it works for him as a person, as Vincent Ferner, and he's fine being Vincent Ferner with one or two people or whatever, and the rest of the world can know him as Alice Cooper and he's totally fine. Like he's like, yeah, all right, well that's but I know that I'm Vincent Ferner. See, I didn't have that.
Okay.
I bought into, I became that. And so when you actually take that on, like your brain just, and to then undergo the process of letting go, I am still like this interview is part of the process of me just shedding the old, shedding that old persona. And, then you do things and you think like you're like taking on this new persona. So like I've been like, now I'm a theater actor and that's my persona now, and I'm like, oh no, there I go again. Yeah. So it's like, it's a long road to sanity. It's a long road to finding out who the fuck you really are. The point of going to school, besides just getting damn fucking good theater education, was also deconstructing that part of me. Like, the theater community most people don't know who Interpol is. Nobody gives a fuck. I got in there. Nobody gave a shit. Yeah. I was just another classmate. The teachers were like, Interpol who? Carlos D who? I don't know who that is. Hi, Carlos Dengler. We're here to educate you. Yeah. And that was really, really, really important to me, is to start from the ground up that way.
And not have this preconceived notion of, oh, there's Carlos D. Like, what's he doing here?
Yeah, there was none of that. Yeah. I could actually hide. So now, lately my challenge has been like, oh, okay, now I have to come out again. And as the moment that I raise my head, it's going to be like, look, it's Carlos D. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. I've been training as an actor for like 3 years and now I'm Carlos Dengler. I'm this real human being right now. And everybody's, it's like, let's catch up. And there's manipulation there too, right? There's like me trying to tell you, oh, don't talk to me that way because now I'm this guy. And like, how is that any different than Carlos D? Yeah. It's a trap in a way. So that's why I envy people like Alice Cooper who have found a way to really...
Like it's a costume for him.
Yeah. And he probably has a consummate manner of putting it on and off. He probably knows how to do that really, really, really well, And I'm still learning how to do that. Yeah.
So what did you learn? Okay, you learned how to be a great actor, or a better actor, or a good actor.
I like to call myself a decent actor.
A decent actor. So you learned to be how is that achieved? Like, what are some ways that they achieve that?
I mean, dude, it was like 3 years of boot camp, Monday through Saturday, nonstop. I mean, some of us slept overnight once in a while, because like it would get so late and it just wouldn't make sense to come back at 9 a.m. to like go over your Alexander technique.
Yeah.
At 9:30 in the morning when you've been rehearsing up until 10:30. There's so much. I mean, it's so much. I mean, there's not even enough time in the day to like really go in it, but it is a full top-down examination of yourself as a Homo sapiens, like as like a creature, as a thinking creature. And it's like, my body right now is very it's very different. Like I look at pictures of myself like as Carlos D and I'm like, oh boy. Oh man, like the chakra all off here and like the posture and like slinging this shoulder. It's like I've become this kind of like critic of like, of like posture because I've learned so much in acting school. But it's, I do yoga now. I've gotten my body in tune. It was not in tune before at all. And now my body is in tune for the most part. And I'm very grateful for that awareness, for that like kind of physical awareness that acting, actor training can give you with all the movement and all the, and then of course there's the vocal instrument that they get you to, access. There were certain habits that I had. I'll never forget, in singing class, I had a huge, breakout moment or like breakthrough, which none of my classmates will ever let me forget about. But it was this track from this song from it was oh my god, Judd's song from Oklahoma, the musical. Alone, what's it called? I'm so bad with musicals, and like I've learned actually a lot about musicals by being in acting school. But Alone in My Room, I think that's Here I Am Alone in My Room. I can't remember what the lyrics were. My teacher was always like, Carlos, you're not opening your mouth. You're just not. I cannot. And and there I am trying to sing this song with my jaw just kind of halfway open. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Look, my mouth is open right now, And she just kept like, she kept, no, stop. Carlos, you are not, I just want you to, forget the lyrics and just belt out the song. Just go, ah. And I want to see that mouth open, whatever you can do to, and I just, then the pianist started again and I was just going, blah, blah, blah. And my mouth was opening and tears were streaming down my cheeks. And my classmates were like looking at me like, holy fucking shit. It's like this spiritual moment, where like there's a fissure in your like psyche or your body like opens up in a certain way. And after it was over, it was like, it really was a portal. Yeah.
Like you had shed something.
Some trauma had been shed. Some kind of level of protection around my body, around my thoughts had been, because like, why do people close their mouth? We close our mouth because we don't want anyone to see what's going on inside, But if we actually allow ourselves to open our mouths so that you can see, I'm letting something go here. I'm letting you have something that's inside of me. How can you act on stage if you're not ready to let a bunch of fucking people have that? That's kind of like the actual psychotic part about being an actor. It's like, I am here to give parts of my soul away to a bunch of fucking strangers.
Which I'm guessing you needed after the whole band experience.
I think you might be right.
So you weren't even doing music at that point, like your own music?
I have not done anything musically I play on my piano and I like, we did some music stuff while we were in school, but I actually haven't.
Was that a burned out thing or just the time constraint of?
Oh, it was total time constraint. Yeah, it was, there was just no time. I've had no time. And then since graduating, I've been trying to like, I've been working on my Fringe show and I'm like just trying to, establish myself as an actor and stuff. So I have, what's starting to happen is I'm thinking so much about music that I'm like, I really should just go and do something musically. And honestly, like, no one needs to know about it. It's like what we were talking about before, that thing that you mentioned about that collaborative, or like where people go to like play and not be known.
Okay. Yeah. So far.
Yeah. Like things like that attract me, where I'm just like, I just need to play music, but I don't want it to be a thing, you know? I mean, I do have that idea about the Dead Can Dance revival, like the Brendan Perry's, I would call it the Brendan Perry, tribute band.
Okay.
So like that idea kind of like tickles my interest.
Or Dengler Can Dance.
Dude, I can't believe that you thought that. Like, I actually thought of it more as Dead Can Dengler.
Oh,
So like if I were to like,
I like that too.
If I were to actually put it out, you know, if I were to form a band and I would like I would do the Brendan Perry parts, I would call the band Dead Can Dengler.
I like that. Yeah, I say go with that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sure. So let's talk about your one-man show.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it, dude. How did it come about? The inspiration, writing it.
You know, it's just been something for 2 years. You know, it's been something that I've been working on. It's been a monologue that I've been working on for 2 years.
Was it your dissertation, or is it like a dissertation?
No, it was just like they give you an opportunity in school to do stuff and you know, just come up with whatever you can. I was just like, oh, well, I was in this band, so why don't I fucking talk about that? I think people want to hear about that. Let's just make it a theater piece. And dude, it's actually really fucking hard to like write a monologue that's like dramatic, that has dramatic weight and like actually makes sense. And it's not just a guy standing up and talking about his life, like to hold an audience. Like it is. And so it's an hour-long monologue and I stay seated at a desk. I saw Mike Daisy do the Agony and Ecstasy of Steve Jobs at the Public Theater, and it blew me the fuck away. And then I discovered Spalding Gray, and that's just, you know, he had passed before I'd gotten a chance to see any of his work. But then, you know, on YouTube you can see a lot of the stuff that he'd just done, and you know, so I saw Swimming to Cambodia, and there's something about that aesthetic or that medium that just absolutely fascinates me, that you could just sit at a desk and hold an audience captive for that long and just talk about stuff in a way that is captivating, intriguing, that draws you in. There's just something so compelling about the sheer minimalism of that, but that it like... So I just saw Mike Daisy again at Joe's Pub, he has a new monologue called The Trump Card, and it was an hour and a half, and it was fucking brilliant. Yeah. And it's just him sitting at a desk talking. And it's amazing. And it's just like the most riveting, it's one of the most riveting pieces of theater I've seen in a long time. Yeah. So I'm totally fascinated by that aesthetic. And so that's the aesthetic that I've chosen to tell my story. Okay. And, you know, along the way, I found that, you know, I've had this like pet scientific interest with paleoanthropology. The science of human origins. And there's something about like the discovery of fossils. Like recently there was Homo naledi, like this new discovery in South Africa. And just like tracing like the pattern of discoveries since, you know, trying to create a line to chimpanzees essentially is what we're doing. Like that 7 million year gap, like what the fuck was going on during that? That just, I mean, that really like goes inside my brain in like a way that just like the shit that I just imagine when I think about that stuff. So I was like, oh, let me put that into the piece somehow, just give it a mythological backdrop. So I kind of throw that in when I find it poetically kind of viable. And then also I think what I really, really wanted to concentrate with this piece was like what heavy metal meant to me. Okay. Like, sort of, you know, speaking about the trauma, it was like the 15-year-old inside of me that like didn't get the love that he deserved. You know, heavy metal was the answer. And like, I wanted to write a play about that. And Interpol has to do with that. Like the guy that I was essentially reincarnating like the lost values of my suppressed 15-year-old when Interpol took off. It was very much like a heavy metal rock star, like decadent spirit that I was kind of on. It just got corrupted with the drugs and the sex. Yeah. But like it was coming from that energy of rebellion and anti-authoritarianism. And so, that's kind of what the piece is about. It's like the discovery of heavy metal, how I became attached to it, how I sold it out when I was like, I'm not doing music anymore, and then how I got rekindled when Interpol took over.
Yeah.
And then somehow finding a way to put paleoanthropology in there, and it's about an hour long.
Okay. Who are your heavy metal guys? I had a metal period too.
You had a what?
I had a metal period. Yes,
I'm still on my metal period.
I used to love. I told the story to someone on another episode about my grandmother's really open to all kinds of music, but she could not get with my metal period. And she was like, I don't care what you listen to, but that devil music, I cannot get. Because I was listening to Black Sabbath, Ozzy, Motley's Shout at the Devil. Yeah, that was my metal. So who was yours?
Similar. The albums that I grew up with that really, really were close to my heart were And Justice for All by Metallica.
Okay.
Peace Sells, But Who's Buying by Megadeth. The first 4 Black Sabbath records. The first Danzig record, Appetite for Destruction. Iron Maiden, like all their albums going all the way up to Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. So that's like 7 Iron Maiden albums. Yeah. Ozzy Osbourne, like the first 4 or 5 Ozzy albums. I listened to a bunch of different stuff, but Queensryche. Okay. So like the first 4 Queensryche records, the EP, the EP Warning, Rage for Order, and Operation Mindcrime. Like I was like, listening to Operation Mindcrime on my headphones like 3 days ago, walking out of Barnes & Noble, like in the dead heat, and fucking singing, going, no, yeah, like out loud. Like, I'm like, I still fucking love this shit. Like, I am not, this is never going away. Like, this fucking album rocks. I fucking love Queensryche.
I never got into Queensryche.
Look, in a way, if you listen to Jeff Tate's like operatic vocals, it's not for everybody. Like, people are like, oh my God, that sounds like the cheesy like metal thing that we all make fun of, like this band, because it's all like warning, warning, warning. Not everyone can get on board with that. Like, into the eyes of a stranger. It's like it's not everybody's cup of tea. But dude, there is a gravitas and a drama and a theatricality to that music that they perfectly encapsulated with those albums that like no other band has been able to, with such dexterity, do what they did, and especially Operation Mindcrime. It's a masterpiece. Yeah. It's an absolute masterpiece.
How'd you get into the metal? Someone turn you on to it, or?
Yeah, Queens. Listening, hearing shit on the radio and going, what is that? That sounds heavy and fucking brutal. Like, I kind of like that. And then, like, you befriend somebody who has, like, a tape.
Okay.
They bring over, I'm like, can you bring over the tape? And they bring over the tape, and it's, like, Quiet Riot and Twisted Sister and fucking Iron Maiden's on there and Queensryche. And then, like, another guy is like, I'll make you a tape. And, like, oh my God, there's Queensryche on here. It took hold that way.
Was this an escape?
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's also in the show. There's some like musicological discussion of how grunge decimated metal. There's a part of that in the show. Because, I'm a very late Gen Xer. I'm 42 years old, and I, am really, really like on the cusp between Gen X and millennial.
Okay.
So, because of when I was born, by the time I was getting into metal, metal was already kind of like the fissures were, it was like 88, 89.
Yeah.
The fissures were actually starting, Jane's Addiction's first album had just come out, and like there was stuff going on in Seattle that nobody really knew about. And of course, when Nevermind happened, that's when it all kind of like broke, right? So that happened for me at a really weird time. So I was like still 20, 21 when all that shit was going on. And it broke through like a kind of fantasy structure that was really, really important for me in terms of metal was all about fucking tits and dragons and blood and fucking like social injustice. It was heightened. It was operatic. It was like on the Shakespeare level, but like with cheese. Just think cheese casserole with Shakespeare, you know, that's fucking metal. And that's what makes it fucking, you know, Iron Maiden writes songs about Alexander the Great and like Rime of the Ancient Mariner and like with no irony.
Yeah.
Like no sense of, and no subtext. Like no, it's like, no, that's what this song is about.
Yeah.
Like that.
Nothing else.
Yeah, it's nothing else. It's just like, we're going to talk about history right now. And it's just like, really? You're going to do that?
This is not a metaphor.
It's not a metaphor at all. And it's just like, wow, like you're just going to fucking, and it's so ostentatious. It's so over the top. So yeah, it was a total escape. And then grunge came and it was just like, now shit is real.
Yeah.
Boring. I was so disappointed when grunge came out.
So how did this find, or did it find its way into Interpol?
So, yeah, it's like, you know,
like, were you listening to Joy Division? Like, that's often the comparison.
Yeah, no, of course. No, yeah. I mean, I went to NYU and then I just started discovering goth clubs and like, you know, different kinds of music. And I was listening to The Cure and like, you know, then that led me into bands like post-punk bands like Joy Division and so forth. So yeah, no, I wasn't coming at Interpol with like a metal, a heavy metal palette. I wasn't like, let's make this more like Megadeth. It was the spirit of metal that kind of made me like really want to take hold of that lifestyle. Like the kind of like, fuck it, we're going to do this. Fuck it. We're just going to fucking do this. You know, you kind of have to have a little bit of that in order to be like, you know, in a really successful band, you have to have the like, kind of like the cojones. I don't know how else to put it. But in terms of like the actual musical influences, no, it was much more like post-punk and like The Cure and alt rock and all of that sort of stuff. That was really fueling at that time. Yeah.
So how did you, just kind of wrapping up, how did you come up with Carlos D?
We were, you know, discussing. We were like, all right, we got to write our names down for like, you know, what they're going to put on the record label. You know, on the like, you know, personnel, like, and, I was just like, I don't know. Carlos Dengler, it's just, it doesn't have a nice ring to it, you know, it doesn't exactly mellifluously fall out of the lips, you know? So, you know, I was like, I'm not going to keep Dengler. With all due respect to my German heritage, Dengler doesn't exactly kind of come out the right way. It's kind of like Ferner. So I decided that, you know, let me keep Carlos and then just put the D there. Because then it's just like, it's still my name, but like then I don't have to pronounce Dengler. Okay.
And did you have the character of Carlos D, the slick back hair, all black? Was that?
Yeah, that was
around the same time.
That was essentially like a merging of like goth and mod, which was kind of like what was going on in New York at that time.
Okay, got it. Cool. So when people at the Fringe Festival, what do you think your intention people to walk away from, or your intention of the play?
I want people to just feel like they got a chance to, you know, ask themselves some questions that they probably don't always ask themselves. I think if I could have, you know, accomplished that on just even like on a, you know, it doesn't have to be like grand or anything. You know? And I just want to like, you know, say that like I am, you know, I don't have any like grand, like, oh, I'm going to take over the world kind of like stuff about this. Like I'm just starting out doing this. It's a great privilege to be at the Fringe Festival this year. You know? So, you know, I'm not saying like it's got to be this fucking, you know, crazy experience. I want to sit there and talk about, you know, a reality like growing up and needing heavy metal and needing things to make sense in a certain way that has to do with art. And I want people to ask themselves like what their relationship to art is, like how art, you know, how art may have made them choose certain things. Like if somebody walks out of watching Homo Sapiens Interruptus with like thinking like, oh wow, you know, I never thought that, you know, I interacted with art like when I was 15 years old in that way. Like, yeah, that would be like a a huge success. I think that would be a massive success.
Yeah. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you, boys.
This is wonderful.
Good.
And there you have it, my conversation with Carlos Dengler. I know you enjoyed it. Check out the entire Talk Music Talk catalog at talkmusictalk.com. You can stream every single episode there and also get more podcast information on the show. Please follow me on Instagram at This Is Boice. Boice is spelled Boice. And some call to actions for you. If you enjoyed this episode with Carlos, please share it on social media to help grow the TMT audience. You could take a screenshot and put this up on Instagram. Make sure you tag me. You could also leave a 5-star rating, especially on iTunes. Also, did you know that Talk Music Talk has an app? It is free to the listener, to the user, wherever you like to get your apps. Just search for Talk Music Talk everywhere. You can also find the podcast on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/This Is Boice, starting with episode 100. That would be Carlos. Thank you so much for listening to this show. Until next time, and there will be a next time, this one's for you, Liz.